Nickelodeon.
Hey everyone, welcome to TV Guys, the show that's ruining 90s shows one show at a time. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian, and I will be the positive light here.
I'm not gonna hate on him, but we are talking about our childhood. So for anyone who clicked on this, you saw the title of it. We're talking about Nickelodeon TV shows. I imagine we'll talk a little bit about the millennial shows too, such as the SpongeBob and then on era. But I stopped watching at that point. I had watched before that in the early 90s, like the old school. Some of you guys would be like, oh, I watch old school Nickelodeon. Give me Fairy Odd Parents and Jimmy Neutron and all that. I'm like, excuse me, there's a show called Rugrats we're going to be talking about today. So that's the era we're going to hit on mostly.
Well, I'm going to bleed a little bit. I'm also going to. I do have Fairly Odd Parents and Jimmy Neutron are both the latest on my list. I don't have anything past that.
Yeah, I figured that would be the case. We'd get a little bit into that territory, but just to manage expectations here, we're hitting on 1991, 92. We're talking about Are You Afraid of the Dark era Nickelodeon. We're talking about Legends of the Hidden Temple era Nickelodeon. We're talking about you go to Disney World. I'm sorry, not Disney World. You go to Universal Studios in Orlando, and there is Nickelodeon Studios right there, and you can actually see them filming some shows or at least see sound sets that era of Nickelodeon TV.
Well, I came prepared just to talk about the cartoons because I feel like the live action Nickelodeon shows could be its own different thing. Or did you have both?
Correct. No, I came just for prepared, but that's the era we're in.
Yes, that is the era. Because we could definitely,
I liked that. I liked the live action Nickelodeon stuff. Some of my favorite Nickelodeon stuff was Nickelodeon game shows. And we could have a whole episode about Nickelodeon game shows because I would binge Double Dare so much. And Legends of the Hidden Temple was so good.
I think we should do a Nickelodeon game shows episode, and we should do a Nickelodeon live action shows because I have a lot to say about both of those.
That's true. And if we say the wrong word while we're talking about these, we'll get slimed.
Of course, you'll never know. I can always add in a slime effect. We can always act like, oh, I'm slimed. We don't have a budget for slime.
We no. Why would we ever make our own slime when I can just go?
Yeah. Well, plus, Matt, you have 4 kids. I'm guessing that a lot of stuff in your house is always sticky.
That's a weird thing to say.
Well, not in a gross way, a kid way. Everyone who has kids gets it.
Well, speaking of sticky things, I don't have a segue for that. I just wanted to make you worried for about 20 seconds. All right, let's start off. What are some shows? Because I know both you and I, we watched some of these shows again, and I even looked up on some of these. I'm like, okay, what is the user rated some of the best episodes? I watch 1 or 2 of episodes of shows I watched as a kid. And I hate to break it to you, Brian. Again, I'm not here to hate on them. But I watch these. I'm like, man, I can't believe I liked these as a kid.
I have some that are nostalgia biased, I'll admit, and then some that I think are legitimately hold up. Even so,
let's say legitimately hold up. Let's work up to that. What are some that maybe that you watch? You're like, I don't know so much about this. Was there any that on the low end?
The low end, I'll start with the 3 that I never really watched as much as a kid. I was kind of just tangentially aware of them. But for the sake of this podcast, I watched them recently, just a couple episodes, which are Real Monsters, Rocko's Modern Life, and Ren and Stimpy.
So 2 of those I watched a lot. I watched Rocko's Modern Life a lot, and I watched enough Real Monsters. Although Real Monsters, it doesn't really trigger things in my mind for me because I'm I know that I watched that. But I feel like it was a very forgettable show. An episode I'm watching, I'm like, I don't remember them sounding like this at all. And nothing's flooding back to me.
Well, I was just distracted with All Real Monsters because one of them that has the voice of Christine Cavanaugh, which was the original Chucky on Rugrats. And I'm like, that's just Chucky.
That's what that was. Is that the girl who is
the tall, skinny girl?
Cane?
Yeah.
But she has a British accent in this. So.
Yes. But out of those 3, Rocko's Modern Life was the one that I could see myself watching the most. I liked that one a lot. I watched a couple episodes of that one.
I liked it as a kid, and I watch it now as an adult. I'm like, oh my goodness, the stupid humor of it. But it's 2 of those shows Real Monsters wasn't so much of this, but two of those shows were like this weird blend of like, as a kid, you probably shouldn't be watching this versus and like the kid animation. Like I remember as a kid, I was not even allowed to watch Ren and Stimpy, so I don't have any context for Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have been if my parents knew anything about it. Because watching it today, it's like this show is like, okay, a lot of Nickelodeon shows hide inappropriate stuff in, but it was kind of blatant. Like at one point I was watching and they talk about he said thrust a squirt of gravy from his turkey baster. It's like, what? Like
So speaking of sticky,
the word thrust too. It's like it's too much. And that's the one
like I think of all the shows on TV at the time that did that and did it well, I would put like Animaniacs at the top, because Animaniacs, they snuck some adult jokes in there, but it wasn't like blatant like that. But it also wasn't just perverted adult jokes either.
Yeah.
Like there's a number of adult jokes that they throw in there. Like this is like funny political commentary that kids wouldn't get, but adults would appreciate. And I like that. But Rocko's Modern Life and Ren and Stimpy very much were the let's throw in some sexual stuff that kids aren't going to get, but it'll be fun for us to shove it in there.
Yeah, that's what she said.
And that's where we're at. Like we're like 5 minutes into this episode, and we've already.
I think it just shows those three shows, especially. I think those are the worst offenders of what kind of jokes those shows evoke.
Yeah, there was some funny stuff with Rocko's Modern Life, because like one that there's not too many episodes that I remember specifically. However, I did rewatch one of the episodes, and as I was watching, I'm like, this is one that I actually remembered. And it was like they took Rocko's Modern Life did a really good job of like taking some other popular stuff and just doing a kid's version of it. So the episode I'm talking about is called Wacky Deli, and it's pretty much the Broadway show The Producers, or the movie The Producers, but done in Rocko's Modern Life, because there's a character who wants out of their contract, so they're trying to create this terrible TV show. So they have Rocko and his two friends, and I don't even remember what their names are, but the heifer and the turtle, they help him write this show, and none of them can agree on which direction to take, so it just ends up being this mess. But weirdly enough, audiences love it, and so he's like, I can't crash my show, and he keeps trying to ruin it, and he's not able to do it. And I'm like, this is a funny premise, but boy, this is just a different era to listen to them.
It is. And what I like about what I think episodes I've seen, Rocko seems to be kind of like the more mild mannered, like doesn't get like the wild energy, which almost makes it funnier, because then he's kind of the straight man around all of the other stuff. And like one time in the episodes he got pushed to where he blew up, but he's sometimes having that stable person works best.
Yeah, he kind of ends up like, I feel like once an episode he has an issue, but for the most part he's like very repressed, and so he is that straight man a little bit more and trying to deal with everyone around him, but the conflict definitely comes from all of that. There's another episode that I remember that I hadn't ever seen the show at the time, but somehow I understood that they were making a TV episode about The Shining, and so they had all these different Shining references in it as they're doing it, like Rocko on like a tricycle and coming around the corner, and there's twins at the end of the hallway, and like him going mad. Like there's all this stuff that was very clearly The Shining, and I'm just like, why are we doing this on a kid's show? I was like 8, and even then I was like, why are they doing this? This isn't okay.
The Shining is one of those things. I personally have never actually seen The Shining, but I can recognize that kind of stuff, because so many different stuff have mentioned it or referenced it or done homages to it, that I get the big stuff. The twins at the end of the hallway, Jack Nicholson, axing his way through the door, the all work and no play. It's kind of like, even there are still some people around who have never seen Star Wars. They still know that Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely one of those things that it was just permeated the zeitgeist so much that we understand the references. I mean, you watch Ready Player One and you'd be like, maybe I didn't specifically see these scenes, but I can understand what they're saying and what they're referencing in these scenes. Yeah.
So Matt, do you have another one that you want to bring up? I think I've covered all I need to about these three.
So there was a show called Kablam that I remember I absolutely loved. It wasn't a very long running show. Are you familiar with Kablam at all?
I'm not. So you go ahead, take the floor.
So this is one that I didn't feel like got its due, but then I watched it, I'm like, oh, maybe it's good that it didn't. But it's essentially like sketch comedy, but done by like these two cartoon characters in a comic strip. So they're kind of like your hosts. It's just like again, it's sort of like all that sort of thing, but they're your hosts that are they do the interludes in between each of the sketches that they have. All of their sketches, they have like one like Action League Now, where it's like all of these toy action figures, and then they just do the voiceovers for these toy action figures as they're doing like they're this eight. It's pretty much an A-Team ripoff, but for these action figure toys. And then like what other ones they have? Because I remember that they had other ones that I saw, but I can't even remember what they were. That one was the one that just like I still remember to this day. But then I would watch the other one. I'm like, oh, these seem familiar. I feel like I remember seeing these, but it was just like a couple of those different sketches, and it just, as an adult, it's not funny. As a kid, I'm like, I'm sure I loved it because I wanted more, but as an adult, I just watched. I'm like, I don't know what my appeal was with this show.
Yeah. The thing is, I sometimes have that, but a lot of times it's kind of like locked in. Like if I like it at a certain age, then like I like it forever.
Yeah. I hope I'm not going to be boring in this as we're going through this episode. I hope I'm not boring. Like, yeah, this sucked. Yeah, this sucked. This sucked.
No, it's funny. Like, so to crossovers, you guys should go listen to Matt's Movies on a Monday episode about Jurassic World, because Dominion. Because the beginning, he's like, I don't want to hate on Jurassic World, and you spent like 98% of the time hating on Jurassic World, which is okay because that movie was kind of garbage, but
but it was my kind of garbage. I mean, it's one of those movies as like I don't like it, or like I like it, but I know that I probably shouldn't.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm not going to give my thoughts on that because that's a whole other episode. So the next one is that all you had about Kablam?
Yeah.
Next one, I think going on the progression would be Cat Dog. Now, Cat Dog, for one thing, has a slapping theme song. I love the theme song. I still remember it word for word to this day. Even like the little guitar licks, like it's like it's locked in there no matter how long ago.
So I was not a Cat Dog guy, but my kids are suddenly being like, I want to watch Cat Dog. I want to watch Cat Dog. You know why? Because on PlayStation Plus this month, if you, we've already missed it. Actually, I shouldn't. I was going to like promo this, but by the time this episode comes out, it'll already be done. Well, you guys missed it. But last month, they had a video game on PlayStation Plus, if you remember, called Nickelodeon All-Star. I think it's All-Star Smash or something like that. All-Star Brawl. And it's like they got all these Nickelodeon characters, and then they did like a Super Smash Brothers version with it. So you got like SpongeBob characters fighting Avatar: The Last Airbender characters. They do have the one lady we talked about from Our Real Monsters. They have Reptar from Rugrats. They've got Hey Arnold characters. And then one of the characters in it is Cat Dog, and so the kids are like Cat Dog, and I don't know why they are so like that character appeals to them as they're fighting with him, but they want to watch Cat Dog now.
Well, Cat Dog it's an interesting concept with them sharing a body, and the fact that they give them such distinct personalities. Like Cat is such like like kind of like the Squidward. It's like Squidward being attached to SpongeBob. Which is interesting because Dog is the same voice as SpongeBob. They're both voiced by Tom Kenny.
Well, there you go. That was his audition.
Also, so I had this idea. I still think it'd be perfect. So at I used to work at Mall of America in the Nickelodeon universe, and they Nickelodeonized all the rides. I still say there's a ride called the Pepsi Orange Streak. It's just a big orange roller coaster that goes around the park. That one would be perfect to be themed for Cat Dog. Now, I know it has to be Pepsi related because of sponsorship, but I thought of this how it could be. It could be called Cat Dog's Pepsi Chase. And the front of the train, you have it as Dog with one of those like things, a sticks attached to him, and he's trying to chase a Pepsi. So it's like the dog is running around the park trying to get this Pepsi. And at the end, you have like, make it look like the cat is like a panic look on his face being dragged. So it'll look like you're riding on Cat Dog, chasing through the park while Dog is dragging Cat looking for this Pepsi can. That way it's still Pepsi. It's still Nickelodeon. It would just be perfect theming. And
that is tremendous. That is a really smart idea. And I love how like well you've thought of it.
Yeah.
It's funny to see like some Disney stuff and like the Disney parks now where like they're doing stuff that's like, oh well, we want to put our IP in here, and it's like it doesn't quite flow with the synergy of everything else that's happening. And yet here you come, you're like, by the way, here's a simple thing that we can do, and it's like you've already done better than some current Disney bigwigs right now.
There's a Jim Gaffigan bit where he's like, how do they come up with these Disney rides? How about you go into a room and there's a picture of Winnie the Pooh?
Man, and then now that Joe, I could do a whole podcast about Disney World itself, but now that Joe Rohde has retired, one of like the guy who he's done a lot of great stuff, but he was like the visionary for Animal Kingdom. He also did a lot of work with Galaxy's Edge, but like he was the guy for Animal Kingdom. That was his baby. And like he had some really awesome stuff that he put together. If you've seen documentaries and things, and you've seen an Imagineer who has got like all these crazy dangling earrings that like has made his ears like kind of even gross because they're like pulling on it so much from the weight, that's Joe Rohde.
Okay. So what do you got? I really, that's all.
And back to Nickelodeon.
Sorry, I don't really have anything to say about that. Sorry.
This will be the other episode where it's just like, watch Matt try not to talk about other things except for Nickelodeon shows, and like I keep wanting to change the subject because again, okay, so I was holding off on saying this because I'm like, at some point I know I'm going to.
Yeah. As
I was watching these shows, I'm like, I thought I watched a lot more Nickelodeon as a kid, and I did with like the live action shows too. But I definitely ended up, for cartoon wise, I watched a lot more of like Saturday morning, like Fox or WB. Like when WB came around and they had like Jackie Chan Adventures and the Men in Black animated show and Static Shock and Pokemon. I know how it's pronounced. When they had like those episodes on Saturday mornings, I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then I watched like Cartoon Network, like Adult Swim stuff. But even before that, I watched like a lot of Cartoon Network, like Courage the Cowardly Dog, and you know, shows like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, we should do an episode about cartoons.
Yeah. So I was big on those sites, and then it's just like these were like okay for me. Even the Golden Boy Rugrats, which we'll get to, I'm sure will be one of the ones that you're like, it still holds up really well. Rugrats, even for me, I was never like, this is so good. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Is that let's talk about it now. That might be one that you're gonna save because it's like really good. But yeah, we've been beating around the bush. We can talk about Rugrats.
All right. Yes, Rugrats is for sure my number one. I loved Rugrats. I would go to the video store and get those orange VHS tapes, had like the best of compilations of Rugrats. I have the 3-pack DVD of all the Rugrats movies. And to me it just holds up. And realizing it different ways as an adult and as a kid, because as a kid it's just funny characters, whatever. But what I like the imagery and their method of storytelling, because a lot of it is going back and forth between the kids' imaginations. And it's like you'll see some fantastical adventure, like they're being chased by a dinosaur, or they're in the middle of a swamp and doing all that, and then after a while you'll cut to what is the real world equivalent of this. Oh, the dinosaur is just Angelica being mean, and oh, the jungle is the backyard, and this what animal is the dog. And it's like seeing how the Rugrats interpret the world, and like how clueless the parents are, because the kids, especially Grandpa Lou, they have this whole world adventure. Sometimes they'll even like wander the neighborhood, and the parents are like, oh, well, I think I'm going to make a potato salad now. It's like, whatever.
And that was parenting in the 90s, even for little babies.
Yeah.
I will say, like, that is a good mechanic that they used. I remember this was a little bit more of like the whole episode was kind of like almost even a flash forward in a way, but it was like the Rugrats imagining themselves as adults, and they spent a lot more of the show in that idea than like what you're kind of referencing, where they would do like scenes of it. But I remember that episode, and that one really stuck with me. Like, I remember like they got pulled over on the way to work, Tommy and Chucky, and they're driving, and they still have like the heads of babies or whatever, and like they're driving to work, and this is how kids view adults. And so the cop was like, I'm gonna have to give you tickets, and so then he gives them 2 tickets to the Raptor on Ice, like admission tickets. Like,
that's a good
cool,
one, yeah.
This is great. And so like I liked that was a smart enough idea. I just never bought into any of the baby characters. like, first of all, I hated Angelica, but you're kind of supposed to hate
Yeah,
Angelica.
she's the villain. Yeah.
Yeah. But I never really was about the baby characters. I was more about the adults. I wanted to see more of Grandpa Lou. I liked Stu and Dee Dee. I didn't like Angelica's parents, but I did appreciate that they had the roles flipped for like the mother being like the unattentive parent, and I'm working and everything is about my work, and the dad being the stay at home.
Well, in a moment, I'm going to talk about the Rugrats reboot, which I watched just the first episode of. But before we get to that, one thing is also that I think out of the babies, the one that was the most compelling.
If I wouldn't have known better, I would have sworn you're about to go into an ad. We're going to get to this in just a second, but first, have you heard about
Chucky from Rugrats? No, because Chucky was one of the better characters, because he had, like, he was the chicken, the apprehensive one, but he also has a super strong bond with Tommy. Like, he will do anything for Tommy because Tommy's his absolute best friend, and Tommy is always there for him. But also, they tackle some real issues. Like, they remember the episode where Chucky's dad shows Chucky like pictures of his mom and realizes, like, yeah, like, your mom died when you were a baby. That's why you don't have a mom. And the second Rugrats movie, Rugrats in Paris, that's what the whole thing is. It's at the beginning, Grandpa Lou's getting remarried, and they have a special, hey, look, it's a dance for all the kids and their moms, and all the babies and kids go out with the moms, and Chucky's just standing there sad, like, oh, I don't have a mom. And it just leads to a super sad moment. And then, of course, they go to Paris, and his dad meets a woman who has a kid, and they blah blah blah. Spoilers, but it's a cartoon from 20 years ago.
You spoiled the movie I'm never gonna see. How could you?
But with Rugrats, the Rugrats movie and Rugrats in Paris are both good. The Rugrats Go Wild is okay. That's a crossover with the Wild Thornberrys.
Have you said everything you want to say about Rugrats? Because we can go into Wild Thornberries if.
In a moment.
Okay.
So, but I wanted to jump on to. I watched the first episode of the Rugrats reboot, and it's okay, but not great. So they have all of the same voice casts for the kids. They got completely new voice cast for all the adults, and so it's interesting. And they made some changes. Like, Grandpa Lou, he is inattentive like he always was, but he's more of like a hippie guy. Like, he's teaching like Tai Chi stuff, and is talking about making cookies, and how, like, yeah, everybody gets to share what I cook. And he's just like this like hippie communist kind of guy. They officially made canon that Phil and Lil's mom is gay, and they don't have their dad in it at all. They don't even mention where his dad is at all, which, to be fair, Howard was the most boring adult in the whole series.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought I remembered that they had a dad in the show.
Yeah, who like was just kind of there. His personality was being boring. So I'm not really mad that they got rid of him. And if you watch the original show, I mean, Betty was gay. They just made it canon now.
Sure.
So I'll watch some more of it. It doesn't hold up to the original, but whatever.
Yeah, I won't watch more of it because I don't like. I remember like my brother being so like offended at the show when they did like the one episode when they like the babies didn't want to wear their diapers, and then they wanted to like go around like nudists or whatever, and he was like, well, we shouldn't watch this show. I'm like, why? I don't like, even as an adult, like why would a kid have that reaction? I don't like, I get that, you know, as kids you shouldn't go out naked. As adults you can, but as kids you shouldn't go wandering around as naked. But I don't know why like he put so much on that. It was always like a weird thing to me, and he didn't watch Rugrats after that, and I'm like, well, I don't really care.
I'm just distracted by the fact that the whole time we've known each other, I thought you were an only child.
Nope, I have an older brother who lives out in New Jersey.
This is like in like Boy Meets World, where Sean mentions, yeah, I have a sister, and then you never hear about the sister ever again. It's like,
or like Phoebe has a roommate in Friends.
Yeah. Denise! My roommate's Denise! I think we have enough time to go into Wild Thornberries.
I think so too. Let's do it.
This is another one. I'll watch some of it, and it's good, and there are some good episodes, but it's not like top tier, I'd say. I think the best thing about it is Tim Curry as the dad.
I mean, you can pretty much say that about anything Tim Curry's in. Best thing about it is Tim Curry. Like Home Alone 2, I like it, but I still like want more Tim Curry. He's in like 4 or 5 scenes. He's not that much of the movie for being as big of an antagonist as he is.
Tim Curry is even the best thing about Muppet Treasure Island, and that's full of Muppets.
He was good. I love Tim Curry. If you haven't seen Clue, like that, I feel like is his magnum opus. People will be like, "Oh, Rocky Horror Picture Show," or whatever. I think Clue is his best role. It is such a fantastic movie, and he does like in the third act of Clue, he's like, "I know who did it," and then he goes to the entire movie. It was like before Luis did it in Ant-Man, he did that in Clue, where he like told the whole story of the entire evening leading up to how people did it and why they did it and their motive. And I'm just like, it was awesome. Tim Curry is great.
Yeah.
Sorry. Again, let's go back to Nickelodeon.
Well, even in the it's called the Rugrats Go Wild. It's the Rugrats and the Wild Thornberrys combined. Even they knew that Tim Curry was the best, because there's even a part in the movie where he's with the babies and they're in this like underwater thing, and he somehow gets, I forget what happened, he got knocked unconscious or something, where like he's got like brain damage, where he's like a little kid, and it's just like he's just kind of like one of the kids with them, and they see like this giant squid that they've been trying to see, whatever, and it's like they knew, like, you know what, we can take a backseat to some of the other adults. They are still in the movie, but like we need to make sure we showcase Nigel Thornberry. I can't do Tim Curry.
I like that you abandoned ship immediately. Let me try the nope.
I will admit when I'm bad at something, because it makes it that much more believable when I say I'm good at something.
I have props to people who will like try it for the first time in full, because like I'm not gonna try an impression in front of people unless I've tried it on my own first. Like last week we did Moon Knight, I did my impression of Stephen Grant, because I've done that accent before and I've done that, but I've never tried to do Mark, and so I still haven't. So I'm just letting you know.
Yeah, and I thought it was also interesting with the Thornberrys with Donnie, because of that character. Like he's basically just like a wild, crazy, like jungle boy. It's basically like Tarzan if he were adopted by a family.
That's right. For me, like the main crux of it, of girl who can speak with animals, like I don't like Dr. Dolittle. I don't like pretty much anything that has that as the catch. Like that gimmick of person that can talk to animals, to me, whatever. I'm so glad that in Encanto they did that, but they're like, we're not going to like do much with it. We'll just, that's his power. He can talk with animals, and then like you get 3 other mentions of it throughout the movie, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, that was the worst part about the movie too, because obviously, you know, the family's on the island. They brought the dog, and so he finally, Eliza can talk to Spike, the Rugrats dog. It's like and he's Bruce Willis. It's like we didn't need Spike to have a name. He's better when he's just the dog.
It's really funny that's Bruce Willis, because I mean it's almost like it's a Look Who's Talking reference.
It basically is. But like Spike, without needing to have a personality, had a heroic moment in the Rugrats movie, which is why that's a better movie.
Nice. Gives me flashbacks of like Santa's little helper from Simpsons. Like that dog has had some good moments, but he's also had a lot of stupid moments.
Yeah. So I think
same with all the characters.
Yeah. Before we get to the rest of the good ones, let's kind of stop down on like the early 2000s. Though the only early 2000s ones that I ever watched, which are Jimmy Neutron and Fairly Odd Parents, which I think we can kind of talk about together.
I've watched a little bit of Fairly Odd Parents. I wouldn't say like I watched too many episodes. It was at a point when I had kind of grown out of that in my mind. Like, you know, as a teenager, you're like, I'm not going to watch kiddie stuff or whatever. But
I took longer than most to get through that. I was watching Disney Channel stuff. I was probably too old for it.
You still haven't even gotten there yet.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. But, I like the fan theory I've heard about Fairly Odd Parents that Timmy is actually an orphan, and the Fairly Odd Parents are the ghosts of his real parents, which is why like his foster parents or adoptive parents like are so neglected, because they're not great. So he gets to hang out with his ghosts of his real parents who actually love him.
See, and I actually thought that was the idea, because I hadn't seen too much of it. So I thought that was the hook of the show, that these godparents were his actual parents.
I don't think it's canon.
Okay. Well, it is to me. It was to me, and I'm gonna just keep thinking.
It is to a lot of fans. my with anything, with my thought with like headcanon is, unless it directly contradicts something in the show, you can believe it.
So I didn't rewatch any of Fairly Odd Parents because I wasn't sure if we're going to talk about it, and I didn't go out of my way to watch it. But I did have positive reception to it, and it felt like it was one of those shows that the humor is up my alley, and if I watched it more, I would enjoy it.
Yeah, and then Jimmy Neutron's interesting because it's a reverse, because a lot of times these Nickelodeon shows get famous and then they get a movie. SpongeBob, Rugrats, Wild Thornberries, Hey Arnold, Doug, they all got movies. Whereas Jimmy Neutron was a movie first, and then the movie was a big hit. Okay, we're gonna make a show out of this.
I actually didn't know that. I thought it was the other way around.
No, the movie was first, and the movie is better than the show. I think the movie still holds up. It's dumb humor, but I like it.
Nice. See, that one. Okay, so in Universal Studios in Orlando, there's a ride there that right now it's a Minion themed ride from Despicable Me. It started off as Hanna-Barbera, and so it would be like Snidely Whiplash. No, that's another Dudley Do-Right villain. Dick Dastardly. There it is.
Yeah.
Dick Dastardly stole Elroy Jetson, and you're chasing him down, and you go through Scooby-Doo land, you go through Jetsons land, you go through Flintstones land, and you're going through these Hanna-Barbera cartoons. Mm-hmm. Second incarnation of it in between that and the
Nickelodeon one, right?
Was the Nickelodeon ride.
I rode that one, yeah.
It was Jimmy Neutron themed, but they did go through other Nickelodeon areas.
Yeah. I remember
that was the one I never was able to ride that ride. I never was there when that
was good. I know they hit Rugrats. I know they hit Hey Arnold. Yes, I'm pretty sure they hit SpongeBob. It was after SpongeBob.
Yes, I think you're right, because I have seen walkthroughs the ride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those are still good. I mean, they're a little. It's not that they're any worse, but it's just that it was kind of when we were aging out a little bit of those shows. They did do a cool crossover of those where they had Jimmy Neutron in the style of Fairly Odd Parents and vice versa, because Fairly Odd Parents is a 2D animation, classic 2D animation, whereas Jimmy Neutron was computer animated.
Nice. So never mind. That's a different thing. I was about to bring up something that wasn't Nickelodeon show. I feel like Fairly Odd Parents, I'll still bring it up anyway, and we don't have to talk too long about it. I feel like Fairly Odd Parents is the same type of humor as Phineas and Ferb. I don't watch too much of Phineas and Ferb, but my kids, I never watched it as a kid, but my kids have discovered it on Disney Plus, and they love it, and they watch it all the time. And so I'll hear it like in the background, and all the Perry the Platypus and Doofenshmirtz and all that stuff is just, and Perry's like agents in control. Yeah. All of that stuff is just so hilarious to me. It's super funny, and it reminds me of the little bit that I remember of Fairly Odd Parents.
I follow Dan Povenmire, who is the creator of Phineas and Ferb and the voice of Doofenshmirtz on TikTok, and he seems like a really cool guy, and he's like engaging with fans. It's the kind of like creator of a show you want.
Awesome. Not like a Dan Harmon type.
No, opposite, different Dan. I think the next one in line. Did you watch any of Rocket Power?
No.
Do you know the premise of it at all, or?
No, I imagine it has to do with power of rockets. I've seen like the poster or whatever, and like kids with like inline skating sort of.
It's basically all it is these 4 kids who live in California. Their dad runs like a surf shop, and these kids are all about biking and skating and hockey and all of this kind of stuff. And it's basically just it's that kind of show. These kids have all the personalities. You got the main 2 are brother and sister, and the sister is like a tomboy, and then you have their friend Twister, who's kind of like not a stoner, but like the Nickelodeon PG version of a stoner. And then Squid is like the new like he's like Chucky. He's like the kid with glasses who's a little apprehensive, but he can still join them. Like in the first episode, he joins the group and he's not as coordinated as them, and they're ready to write him off like, oh, this kid's not great. And then they find out he's like a fantastic goalie for hockey, and like that kind of gives him the respect. He becomes one of the gang.
Gotcha. So the premise, like, I feel like that premise was used so much in like the 90s and early thousands of like, oh, these people that they just love extreme whatever, like Meet the Deedles, or the first Power Rangers movie where they jump out of an airplane for some reason.
Yeah, and then they're rollerblading for some reason in that movie.
Or Brink, it's like the X Games are cool. Let's appeal to that crowd.
I do remember at the height of there was a summer when I was super into Rocket Power. I was watching it a lot. And that's the same summer that at camp, I decided to have a piggyback race where I slid and skidded on a gravel road and skinned up like half my body.
Well, that Like you can't see me out there, but like I made like the biggest cringe face when he said that. Like that hurts to hear. I put myself in your circumstance right then for involuntarily.
Yeah, my cousin Shelly was on my back, and like when we fell, basically I hit the ground, and she basically used my body as a sled, so she was fine.
Yeah, that makes sense. Brian, save me.
Take a break real quick. Take an.
And I want to tell you about a special offer from Skillshare.
No, it's a kind of an ad. I'm just gonna brag and show you my Father's Day gift, which was a mug. It's called. Nice. It says the Dadalorian.
Look at that. Jack bought me a mug that said number one dad. And he's not the type that would be like, oh, let me just flatter dad. But he's like, I bought it for you because you're the number one dad. I'm like, well, look at that. And then he's just like, and then they had other ones. They should only have one number one dad mug and then have one person be able to buy it. I'm like, well, technically, yes, they should. But
has he met other dads? He's sure you're the number one?
I'm pretty great. I don't know about. See, this is why you're confused because I haven't dadded you. So, I've only dadded him. That's the proper term, dadded.
So, listeners, before we started recording, I got to see a little bit of Matt in dad mode because recording. His son came down, and it was still like you get like the serious tone, but instead of having like talking about anything serious, here's what he was saying. He's like, "Well, you see, in this level of the video game, it'll tell you how many enemies you have left," and it's like he's going in full like sweet dad mode, but he's talking about video games and how many levels and how to beat the bad guy and stuff. He's like, that's Matt in dad mode.
That's true. It's like you can burn the house down, but if you get your video games wrong, then that's a big problem. So we need to talk about this.
But I think for Matt, for as obsessed with the Back to the Future as you are, what I would love. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say I love this, but it would be really funny if one of your kids set fire to the living room rug and then just winked at you.
Even like I get your reference when you couple it with Back to the Future fan, totally get it. But out of the blue, if they did that, I wouldn't just pick up on the reference. I wouldn't get that they're calling back to a line, a throwaway joke from Back to the Future. I wouldn't catch that.
It's also
just a wink.
It's just a risky move to commit arson for a joke.
But my kids are risky people. So
Matt,
it's really funny. I just talked to Elijah about like risk reward and that whole concept. And then here you are giving like a terrible example of it. High risk, crazy low reward. Obviously I should do this.
There was a comedian once who talked about how one day his dad went crazy and just to like show dominance, like kicked in every door in the house, like, what are you doing in here? And he's like, it turns out later my dad was already planning on replacing the door, so he just wanted to get some mileage out of it.
That is totally a dad. I would do that if like my daughter is a little more sensitive, and so if I did that, she would definitely start crying, and that wouldn't be fun. My older kids, like, it's fine to give them a little bit of a scare every now and then, but I think she couldn't handle it. And my youngest, I don't know if he could either. So
you got to find the line.
Exactly.
So back to NickToons. I have 3 more on my list that we haven't talked about. How many do you have?
One that I can think of. I don't have them written down, but I think there's only one left.
All right.
No, 2. There's 2.
Well, there's 3 because I have 3. So
yep. I'm sure my 2 are the ones on your list. So
I'm sure. I'll go with the third one. I think has the chance of not being on your list, which is Doug.
No, that's actually the one of them on my list.
Oh, then you're missing a major one because the other 2 are very important. But we'll start with.
Well, I don't like SpongeBob. SpongeBob is stupid.
Podcast over.
It's not funny at all. It's so annoying. You wanted to talk about Doug. We're talking about SpongeBob first because SpongeBob sucks. All right.
SpongeBob does not suck. Okay, early SpongeBob is definitely so much better. The ripped pants episode, the band episode, those ones are great. The first episode when he joins the Krusty Krab,
you're leaving these pauses like I should know these episodes and then go back in my memory and be like, oh, you know what?
At least heard
You're
of it.
right.
They play the Bubble Bowl, and they have like footage of them playing in an actual Super Bowl, and they intercut it with footage of like actual like live action like football fans holding up torches as if like they're playing this great show. And
aren't they supposed to be underwater?
Yeah, they come up with a bubble that comes up from the ground. They're not stupid.
I'm so sorry.
And when they're playing it, I'm pretty sure it cuts to a Van Halen song that they're singing, and it's like it's SpongeBob, but it's Van Halen singing, and it's a big win for Squidward because he was trying to show up his rival that he can actually make a good band out of these misfit underwater people.
Which Van Halen song? That's gonna make all the difference.
Sweet Victory.
I remember when that went around, like the petition a couple years back, like do SpongeBob singing "Sweet Victory" at the Super Bowl for the Super Bowl show, and then they didn't do that, but Maroon 5 actually did have like a SpongeBob reference, like they had a clip that they added in, and then was like, oh my gosh, SpongeBob, and then like that was it, and they're like, oh, okay, well that was all that we got. Never mind.
Yeah. Matt, you need to understand it. So I had like a life-size SpongeBob stuffed animal. I had SpongeBob pillows, pillowcases, car. When I first got my first car, the steering wheel cover was a SpongeBob steering wheel cover. I had a SpongeBob shirt with matching pants that I would actually wear in public. I have right over there on CD.
You think you're making the case for SpongeBob, but you're actually making a case against yourself.
No, I'm not. I have on CD the SpongeBob movie, the original movie. The new ones are whatever, but the original SpongeBob movie soundtrack, and that soundtrack is actually a really good soundtrack. It's even got like actual. It's got like Avril Lavigne singing the theme song. It's got actual artists, and it is great humor. They have fleshed out characters. You know, Marshall's dad from How I Met Your Mother is Patrick, which is a really recognizable voice. And Clancy Brown, who's in like everything, is Mr. Krabs.
Clancy Brown is freaking fantastic. I love Clancy Brown.
Yeah, and there are I have not one but two SpongeBob video games that are both very fun to play, and they have a lot of deep cut references to the show. And it's like, I don't know. I all this is to say that SpongeBob is terrific and Matt is wrong.
Your Honor, the defense rests. I have no further questions.
Okay. I feel like I didn't even talk about the show. I just talked about my love for the show to prove you wrong.
And you didn't. You made a case against yourself.
Okay. Well,
I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, you're mentioning the SpongeBob movies. I haven't seen any of the movies, but there was one on, and so I saw parts of it. What's the one where Matt Berry voices a dolphin?
I'm not sure if I've seen that one.
Oh. Then it's one of the newer ones, but yeah. He's like this guardian, and he's supposed to be watching the Earth from like getting hit by a meteor or something like that. And then SpongeBob and Patrick show up, and then he's like, "Okay, since you're here, can you just make sure that nothing happens? I have to run to the bathroom. I haven't been able to go to the bathroom for like thousands of years." So he runs to the bathroom, and of course, the worst happens while they're waiting, and he comes out, and his whole life mission is in shambles, and so then he attacks them.
That's kind of like when Troy leaves to get the pizza in Community, comes back and everything's on fire and the gnome is staring at him.
That's such a good episode and a great scene.
Yeah. In the original SpongeBob movie, so SpongeBob and Patrick are stranded at one point, and you know who saves them? I bet you're not going to guess.
David Hasselhoff.
It is David Hasselhoff. You knew that reference?
I just remember the trailer and him. I'm David Hasselhoff.
Yeah. They get on David freaking Hasselhoff, and he's like, his like back muscles like lock them in as if it's like a ride, and he like shoots them down back to Bikini Bottom.
Our listeners out there, I just want you to remember that Brian said, I bet you won't guess this, and then I did guess it. He didn't specify what he was going to bet, and I didn't specify it either, but you guys should decide what should be a punishment for Brian for me guessing it and him betting incorrectly. Let us know, and we might do it.
What should also be the punishment for Matt not liking SpongeBob?
Nothing. I should actually get a parade in my honor. A day named after me.
See, I don't still have all of my SpongeBob stuff, but I still have a Sponge bobblehead, which, yes, that's the only correct name for it.
I'll allow it.
It's right there.
It's right there. I'm not gonna fight that one. There's too many other battles. All right. So you talked about your love for SpongeBob. Is there anything specifically about the show that you're like, this I want? I mean, you talked a little bit about the show, but is there some general stuff that you want to hit on before we move on?
I'm the character. I'm a character guy. I love the characters. I mean, SpongeBob and his laugh can get annoying sometimes, but the fact of you got Patrick who's dumb but loyal. You got Squidward who like sometimes his like got the lets his armor showing, but he's kind of the curmudgeon. You got Mr. Krabs like the stingy boss with his villain Plankton, who's just like a cartoonish villain even for a cartoon. You got Sandy, who's like the tough Texas chick who can beat all of them up. There's just a wide range of characters that they have, and there's just so many different stories they can do. Like I don't know, and the fact that they could make multiple movies, multiple soundtracks, and SpongeBob is still going. Like Rugrats came back for a reboot. SpongeBob is still going on his original run and since 1999.
Jeez, that's nuts.
Yeah.
SpongeBob is a show. So there's something about dumb humor, and SpongeBob is dumb humor, even if it's cleverly written, which I can give it that. I don't know because I haven't seen enough of it, but I can guess because of its lasting power that there is some smart writing behind it. Mm-hmm. And it takes some talent to be able to do smart writing for dumb humor. But which like look at Dumb and Dumber. Dumb and Dumber had very smart writing, but really stupid humor. And but if a movie has stupid humor or a show has stupid humor, it has to be your kind of stupid humor. That's why a movie like Napoleon Dynamite is so divisive, because it is stupid humor, but there's some people like it is exactly that type of stupid humor for them, and there's others that like it's not. And so because it's not their type of humor, they just see the stupid part of it and then they just like rail on it. And so I feel like that's where I'm at with SpongeBob. I don't know why. I feel like it should be a show that I liked, but I watched a couple episodes and none of it was funny to me. And then it like got drilled home when you see all of these memes that people will throw at you, like SpongeBob memes out of context. And you're like, what the heck is all of this? And so I had a coworker who would do like SpongeBob memes to me all the time. I'm like, can you use other GIFs? Can you use anything else? Why does it have to be SpongeBob? I don't, whatever. Yeah. So that's where it comes from.
So sometimes it's dumb humor, but sometimes what they do is they use Patrick as their outlet for dumb humor because he is the dumb character. They have a thing where he's at the Krusty Krab and he's supposed to answer the phones and say, "Is this the Krusty Krab? No, this is Patrick." That's one of his jokes.
I was gonna say that's a good joke. I get it.
Or like, this one is kind of dumb, but it just shows Patrick's level of humor. I just watched one today where they're blowing bubbles and SpongeBob's able to blow a bubble and it turns into a ship or turns into all this crazy stuff. There's one where it turns into an elephant, and as it's floating away, it's making all these elephant noises. And then Patrick's like, "Ha ha! It's a giraffe."
See, I laughed because your pause, like your expectant pause, like he's got that. He's gonna laugh. He's gonna laugh about this.
Thing is that's their outlet. They put all of their dumbest humor onto one character, so they can have slightly less dumb humor for all the rest of the characters.
I feel like SpongeBob has a lot of dumb humor, though.
But like, SpongeBob is naive more so than dumb.
I mean, naive is a version of dumb. Like Mr. Krabs, some of his jokes can be dumb, but it is like a satire of a capitalist corporatist type guy. And so like even if he might act outside of common sense and dumb in that way, it's not specifically dumb, but it's a version of dumb.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I think
the best way to describe it is, so in the very first episode, SpongeBob's trying to get a job at the Krusty Krab, and they don't want to hire him. And so Mr. Krabs sends over this goose chase. Who, give me this golden spatula with thrusters and all this extra. He's made something up. And SpongeBob's like, "Yep, absolutely, I'll get it." And while SpongeBob's gone, they get overrun with like anchovies, like the cartoon anchovy. They all want burgers, and it's like this crazy swarm. They don't know what to do. And all of a sudden, SpongeBob comes back with this exact spatula that shouldn't exist, and he's able to like churn out and like feed all these guys all the Krabby Patty burgers, and they get them out, and they're like, "Holy crap, this guy actually can work!" And that's how he got his job. So it's like he's naive, but loyal and hardworking to the point where he can make himself useful.
Nice. Here's a plug that we're not paid for, but I thought was a fun reference and fits the conversation. If you watch any of like Game Theory or Film, they have like three channels: Game Theory, Film Theory, and Food Theory. And I think this actually might have been a Food Theory episode. They did an episode where like they looked at like burger emojis, and the on the burger emojis they have different order of how they put like the condiments and the toppings. And so like, well, what actually is the best order to put these? And they threw in the Krabby Patty order that they have in there of how they have like that order. And they did these taste tests, and they discovered, personally speaking, that they felt that both the Krabby Patty both held the brewed together the best and also tasted the best. So there you go. If you're making a burger, try and stack it in the exact order that they do as a Krabby Patty and see if that works better for you.
Also, you want to hear a really crazy fan theory?
Sure.
So the whole thing with Plankton owns a rival restaurant that no one goes to because their food's terrible. And he's always trying to get the Krabby Patty recipe. The theory is that the Krabby Patty recipe includes crab meat, which is messed up because Mr. Krabs is a crab.
That is messed up. True. That's a Sweeney Todd situation going on there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we can talk about Doug because I don't have nearly the same enragement. I'm making up so many words. Like this is like the third word that I realized I'm like, that's not a real word that I've used this episode, and there's probably more. But enragement, we're gonna go with enragement.
Okay. Doug is good because Doug is there's not really a big hook to it. It's just a kid going through life. Like there's not like, oh, he's underwater, or he's a baby who can talk, or he talks to animals. Like it's literally just that, but it works because they have the characters. They make Doug likable. Doug is kind of a little bit similar to Rocco from Rocco's Modern Life, where he's kind of the straight man and they got all these crazies around him.
Yeah. And Doug has a little bit of a noir feel of like the talking to his journal, and like that's kind of an outlet for his inner feelings. So we're able to relate with Doug and see the emotions he's feeling. And I think that this is a good show for that age group. But as I watched it as an adult, I was like, oh, this isn't fun for me to watch as an adult. But this I can at least recognize as why it was popular, is because it does speak to that time and that age group and the things that they go through. And that's probably what I enjoyed about it as a kid. It's a tad more on the boring side versus like something that might have a little bit more flash or might have a lot more jokes in it or something like that. Not that it doesn't have that, but it is a little bit more serious than some of these comedies we've talked, especially SpongeBob.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And it's been a long time since I've seen Doug's, I think it's called Doug's First Movie or Doug's Big Movie or whatever it's called, but I like that one a lot.
Plus it gets extra points because it's got why am I blanking on his name? Billy West.
Yes.
In it. And if you are familiar with that voice, or like that name rings a bell, he's voiced a lot of things such as Fry and Professor Farnsworth on Futurama. He's voiced the Honey Nut Cheerios bee mascot. He voiced Bugs Bunny in Space Jam and some other more modern WB things. He's done a lot of voice work. Very talented voice actor.
Was he Doug right from the beginning, or is he just modern Doug?
I feel confident that he was Doug right from the beginning, but I can check that while you're talking.
Yeah, and Doug is also one that it was a Nickelodeon cartoon, but then it came back as a Disney cartoon. Then it became Disney's Doug, and I don't really know much about the difference, if there's any difference in quality with those, but it's interesting because that's one of the only ones that kind of crossed that line of being both Nickelodeon and Disney.
Yeah, that's strange. I didn't realize that was what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's Billy West was Doug in the Nickelodeon series, but he was replaced by Tom Q in the Disney series.
Okay, gotcha. So my guess is that the Nickelodeon one's probably better because it just with Billy West and being the original, and sometimes when you take it over, it's not as good.
Yeah. And you know something about like people taking over for voices as you followed the Muppets for all of these years.
Yeah, definitely. But I already decided we're going to do a Muppets episode eventually. I'm not sure exactly when, so
we have to. I mean, that's like your thing. So
exactly. So I'll save that commentary for that. I mean, I'm not going to do that. I talk about the Muppets all the time, but I want to save some of my commentary for that episode.
Can I real quick pivot? I know this wasn't animated,
okay,
but this triggered my nostalgia as like a kid, like a toddler, like 4-year-old, 5-year-old type.
Yeah.
Do you remember a TV show on Nickelodeon called Eureka's Castle?
Yes.
I watched an episode of that this week because I was like looking at things, and then I saw that Paramount Plus actually has it. I'm like, what? Like, this is the like diet Sesame Street. You know,
Yes.
Sesame Street had all the acclaim and like had Jim Henson Company behind it. Eureka's Castle didn't have that, but they still scratched that itch for kids. And it was still really good. They had one of my favorite characters was Batsy, who was like a nearsighted bat who would constantly fly into things. But you know, then I liked the giant that they had. Like Eureka's Castle kind of has this wind up key on the outside of it, and it was this giant who would wind it up each episode. I really enjoyed it as a kid. Obviously, when you watch as an adult, you're like, yeah, this is very kid oriented. But what I didn't realize is that Eureka's Castle was developed and written by R.L. Stine, the writer of Goosebumps.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know. I was like, this feels like Jim Henson, but I feel like that's more like it's just a knockoff. So I looked up to see, is like, did he have anything to do with this puppeteering? And I'm like, nope, obviously he didn't. But look who was involved, R.L. Stine.
Yeah. All right. So there's only one to talk about, and I'd be shocked if it wasn't the same with you. We got to talk about Hey Arnold, right?
Yep. Hey Arnold, I actually liked. I didn't watch a new episode this week, or I haven't watched an episode this week, but I did rewatch like that Christmas episode I talked about.
I did,
at Christmas time.
And I watched that, and I watched, I think, the first 2 episodes.
Man, that Christmas episode, like, they never went that deep again. Like, I wouldn't say that was dark, but that was like a very heavy subject matter. And yeah, they would every now and then dip into some stuff that's a little bit more serious side. But for the most part, like, it was a pretty lighthearted show. But like that episode was really some heavy topics. Yeah.
The thing is, Hey Arnold's kind of like the best thing from a lot of different shows. They have the heavy stuff like that. I think they also did some heavy stuff, I think, with Arnold's parents, because we never really know a whole lot about Arnold's parents, except the thing they went missing, and he's living with his grandparents. But it's like, you know, they're a family. They're not a rich family. They're living in New York City, and this boarding house, and you got the silly comedy with all the kids, because there's like all, you know, the neighborhood kids and all his gang of kids at school. Then you got the relationship stuff with Helga, which can range from like really serious and depressing because her home life isn't great, to also just slapstick humor because she's kind of like almost sometimes a grown-up Angelica. Yeah. And so it's like they have so many different moving pieces. They can make, we're going to do a serious episode. We're going to do a silly episode. We're going to make they have so much at their disposal, and they used a lot of it.
Yeah. Helga was such a unique character that I hadn't seen in any show up to that point of like, sure, we're going to make her a villain, but we're going to play on that idea that of kids, like when they are that mean to someone is because they want their attention that much. Yeah. And you just, I still can't think too much of a character that's quite like that, like Helga is.
No. And Arnold, again, is a lot like Doug and a lot like Rocco, where he's kind of the straight man. He's he's kind of the more reasonable one, and he just kind of is reacting around him. And you know, even Gerald, his best friend, is a little more hyped up, a little more athletic, but he's like not cartoonish. Like I feel like the core characters are the more grounded, with the exception of Helga.
Yeah. Arnold and Gerald have a really good friendship, and neither of them have to be absurd, and they do feel like actual characters. And it's really nice to have a kids show with actual fleshed out characters that you can relate with. And I mean, like, they didn't have too many shows back then too that would have like a white friend and a black friend, and that they're able to both just be themselves. And like I don't know how much they ever went into anything of dealing with any racism or anything like that. I can't remember any episodes specifically.
But my guess is they did at some point.
Yeah, from all that I saw and all that I remembered, it was just he has a friend, and they're different races, and there's different races in the building, and they coexist as a community, as a family. Yeah. And they kind of were normalizing that more than like an all-white cast.
And even Grandpa Phil is him. Grandpa Phil, he kind of has a little bit of that like kooky grandpa, a little bit like Grandpa Lou from Rugrats, but he's also got his finger on the pulse of things, and he like is there. He's got that support system for Arnold when he needs it. He knows when he needs to just let him be, when he needs to have a talk, And I mean, we could have talked about Grandpa Phil on our Best Dads episode.
Yeah, he is a little bit more on that absurd side. The memories that I have of him have a lot more of like he's the goofy grandpa. He almost reminds me of the grandpa from like Meet the Robinsons.
Yeah, he is, but he's never. But like, like Grandpa Lou was kooky to the point where he's neglectful, whereas Grandpa Phil wasn't. And
yes.
And it's interesting because he's also that's also voiced by Dan Castellaneta, who's Homer Simpson.
Oh man, I'm glad we didn't bring that up as a dad on that episode.
We did actually.
Oh, that's what we mentioned it and mentioned about like
he didn't make our list. He made our list as to why he wasn't on the list. And
correct.
Yeah,
it's like Marge is a good mom, and we could have talked about it for best moms, but it's like she ends up by not like calling out Homer for his abuse. She ends up being culpable. It's just one of those things. Like, I know they're playing the abuse for laughs and it was a different time, but it's like you're abusing your kid and you can't make any list of top whatever when you have that as your resume.
True. Also, interesting timing that I wouldn't have noticed. So last winter, I watched through all of Step by Step because I hadn't seen it in a long time.
Sure.
And then watching Hey Arnold, one of the nerdy kids at school, Eugene, who's one of the main kids. I always knew Eugene was one of the main kids. Like, that is Mark from Step by Step. Like, and I wouldn't have noticed it if I didn't just spend like a couple of months watching through all of Step by Step just not long ago.
There you
go. Little things you didn't notice. So like it's fun to like listen to these things because a lot of these voice actors like, oh, these are people from other things.
Yeah, and then you notice these things just little by little, or like step by step, you notice them.
I see what you're
doing. I was like, I was gonna leave it out, and then I was like, wait, I have to say Step by Step for you to get the joke. So I
just realized my post joke noise is Fozzie Bear going
waka waka. Oh my gosh, I made a waka waka joke the other day. I can't even remember what it was. Oh, like someone needed to like walk around and like, I gotta go waka. I'm like, oh, you're gonna be a Muppet? You're gonna waka. It was better than that, but I promise it was better than that.
That's like your version of when I did the impression and backed out. You're like, oh, that was bad. I know it was bad.
Except for this joke I just made was bad, but when I actually made it, it's one of those like you had to be there type jokes, but like it hit different at the time versus.
So this is not the greatest joke in the world. This is just a tribute.
Just a tribute.
Yeah. Well, couldn't remember the greatest joke in the world.
No. Well, good reference, Brian. I gave you a little golf clap here. I don't know if you could hear that.
And we're not going to explain that because if you get it, you get it.
You get it. If you're there, you're there.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything we missed? I think we hit all of the major points I had. Matt's wrong about SpongeBob, the basic stuff.
Nope. The only like show that I went back and rewatched for like cartoon and like watched all of it so far was the 90s Spider-Man from Fox Kids. That would be on Saturdays. And then I watched X-Men Evolution. I haven't rewatched that yet. But it's like, that's on Disney Plus. So there's all these old cartoons, but I'm like, those are the ones I wanted to watch. Or like the Batman animated series on WB. That wasn't on Saturday mornings. I was like after school, but like I loved those. And so I watched a little bit of that on HBO Max.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give a shout out to those right now. I'm sure if we talk about like another one where it's like we go to Cartoon Network or something like that, like I don't feel like we could do a full episode on like the Fox Kids shows. I don't know if you were as big on those as I was. But.
No, we could combine it with like the Disney cartoons because it really isn't a ton of those besides like Recess and Kim Possible. So maybe we could combine those together.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't think I ever watched really any Disney cartoon like TV shows. Honestly,
I watched Recess. I watched Kim Possible. I watched a little bit of The Proud Family and a little bit of Phineas and Ferb.
I did watch some Kim Possible. Now that you bring that up,
yeah. Also, here's a plug: Christy Carlson Romano and Will Friedle, who you might know as Ren Stevens or Eric Matthews, but also Kim Possible and Ron Stoppable. They have a channel on YouTube where they do and also a podcast as well called We Hear Voices, where they talk to voice artists.
Oh, nice. Tell me when they have Jim Cummings on there. He is like the GOAT voice artist to me.
Yeah, he's also Cat from Cat Dog.
He's also like a million things.
I
Like
know.
his resume, he's like Disney's in-house go-to guy. Like, we need a imposing sounding actor, so we need you for this.
If you want us to do an episode on the best voice actors, we should, whether
I'm
you
just
want
going
us
to
to or
talk about
not.
Jim Cummings the entire time. Did you know that Jeremy Irons, when he's singing "Be Prepared" in Lion King, that like he gets to a point when like he can't keep the song going? Like I heard, and this story doesn't quite make sense of why of this, but it sounded like he threw his voice out. I don't know if you can do it that way, but like partway through the song. So like there's this moment where it's like he does the "You won't get a sniff without me" or
Yeah.
whatever. After that line, then it's Jim Cummings singing for the rest
Huh.
of the song.
I know this because you told me that. I forget if it was on the podcast or just in person.
Yeah, you listen to it, you can hear the definite shift between like if you're really listening to it, but Jim Cummings does a good enough job that it's like you might not notice if someone didn't point it out.
Okay. Sounds good. I'll have to listen for that.
There you go.
But let's jump into trivia.
That wasn't the trivia. We had trivia from last week. So last week we talked about Ethan Hawke being in Moon Knight, and so he has a daughter who is in a lot of TV shows, and one of the ones that is big right now she's in. So the question was, who is his daughter, or what show is she in? Terrence got it right by knowing she was in Fear Street, but we were actually referencing Stranger Things. His daughter is Maya Hawke, who plays Robin in Stranger Things. Robin of the Steve and Robin coupling. That's not really a couple, but a partnering.
They're a great platonic couple.
Yes. Just like Steve and Dustin.
Yeah, I like Robin a lot. A lot of times when you add a character, because she was added in season 3, it's like, oh, they're losing steam, they're adding characters. No, I like Robin a lot.
Yeah, like they gave her a lot of good stuff in season 3. Like they made you like her right away.
And now they're giving her time to pair up with Nancy, so she's not just a Steve side character. She's becoming her own character.
Yes. Yeah, that's important.
So this is not going to be a very hard question today. A lot of these Nickelodeon shows have movies. So what was the first Nickelodeon show to have a theatrical movie?
I think I know this one. Feel pretty confident.
All right. Again, this is not
I'm not going to say it right now, but
and for a hint, I saw this in theaters, but that's not a very good hint because I saw all of them in theaters.
Oh my gosh. I saw this one. Someone paid like pay-per-view. That's how old this is. When I was at their house, they paid pay-per-view for it, and I watched like 20 minutes of it, and I'm like, I don't like this. And then I didn't finish it. So
it's a great movie.
I feel guilty for that. Now I don't know how much pay-per-view was back then, but I'm sure it was more than God, even back then, like even in the 90s. Like you look at prices for stuff now, and there's so much inflation like from today versus the 90s. Guess what has had deflation? Movie rentals, because you can get a Redbox for like $1.50. If you go to Blockbuster back in the day, you would get a movie for like 2 nights, a new release for 2 nights. You had to pay like $5 for it. It was ridiculous, guys. If you weren't there, there was pain. That's a lot of money to rent a movie.
Yeah. Well, there weren't other options. You couldn't go to streaming services.
I know. You had to like hope it was going to be on TV, and then if it was, you could get like your dad to get like a blank tape and record it from TV, and then you'd have it, but you'd also have the commercials, and you don't have to fast forward.
Yeah, I had that for the Great Muppet Caper.
I had that for a number of movies. My dad like recorded so many movies off TV. We had like a whole stack of or like a whole cabinet, like 3 or 4 different shelves, and each shelf had about 30 different tapes, and each tape had about 3 movies on it. So had a lot.
I still have a pretty decent DVD collection. I haven't really added to it a lot since because everything's on streaming services. But what I liked but don't have time for anymore is all the special features.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've used special features for some, but there are some like bigger movies I'm like, I definitely have to check out the special features on these.
There are 2 shows, The Office and Lost, which I have done what I call an absolute complete rewatch, which is on the DVDs. You watch every episode, every deleted scene, every bonus feature. Before you move on to the next disc, you have to watch everything that disc has to offer. I did that. I've done that for Lost, and I've done that for The Office.
Look at you. just giving it your all.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. Well, that's it. You can check out all of these Nickelodeon shows on Paramount Plus, and if you don't have Paramount Plus, then you can't check them out. So, I mean, there's pirating, but we're not going to suggest that on a thing that we have, recorded for jury's sake. So, jury's listening to us. We did not encourage piracy. So.
Yep. What we are going to suggest is buy a new lamp. I got a new podcasting lamp, and my lighting looks terrific right now.
Well, not right now. It looked better when you actually had some sun streaming in, but now it's just like there's just you, blackness behind you.
I like that. It's just
only
me.
You are illuminated. For me, we've got all these clothes in the background of well, whatever. Anyway, until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
I remind you to stay tuned and keep watching.